Coming up on this episode of FAS TV, we hear the story of the farming cooperative Highland Grain, discover the importance of planning for winter feeding, and the breeding benefits of genomic testing.
She's actually joint top DWP index heifer in the whole of the UK.
In the north of Scotland, Highland Grain is a grain processing cooperative based on the Black Isle. During harvest, the site becomes a hive of activity, with lorries delivering 12 hours a day and drying and processing taking place 24 hours a day.
My name is Gary Cato. I manage Highland Grain on behalf of its 88 members. I've been in the job now for 3 years or 4 harvests, as I learned that we count by harvests in this job. Highland Grain first started in the sort of late 70s, 1978 was the first harvest, I believe. And it came about as a result of some local farmers feeling they were getting a rubbish deal from the local maltings at the time. Everything was priced during harvest, and they felt that if they joined forces, stored their barley, dried it, they would have more marketing power rather than put everything to market at harvest. And it worked. And so Highland Grain has sort of grown over the last 40 years from an initial tonnage of 4,000 tonne to 40,000 tonne as it is now, and 88 members as opposed to the original 9 members. Our membership spreads from Golspie in the north all the way around to sort of Forest, Kinloss in the east. Our membership varies, so we've got guys that are purely arable, we've got guys that are mixed, do stock. The co-op is run by a board of directors, 10 directors, or up to a maximum of 10 directors on the board at any given time. And they're all members of Highland Grain, so they're all part of the cooperative, they're all business owners. We try and keep the board lively by refreshing the directors regularly. So a director will do 9 years maximum, 3 terms of 3 years, so it gives us flexibility if they want to leave or we're looking for new fresh blood coming in. If a director then makes vice chairman or chairman, they break into a different format, so they do 2 lots of 4 years, just so that we get a return of service from them. Because it's a busy job being the chair. By that stage they really understand the business. It's malting barley that we handle for the customers, 2 varieties predominantly. This year it's Laureate and Sassy. It changes as the varieties move on. It was Concerto predominantly for a number of years, then Laureate broke onto the scene. We now have Sassy, Diablo. There's other varieties poking their nose in like Tungsten. To handle more than 2 varieties on site, it just becomes so convoluted. It's a real headache. We have done it, and unfortunately it chose a year where we then suffered some quality issues with the skinning. So not only were we trying to handle 3 varieties off member farms, 3 varieties to the lab, 3 varieties to the intakes and the green bins, we also had the skinning issue to factor in as well. So it was a few headaches that year, so we dropped back to 2 varieties. We segregate by variety, obviously. Most of the contracts are based on a 98% varietal purity, so we need to keep that segregation going. And that segregation goes from the intakes through the green bins to the dryer lines and then on to the final storage locations. We try and stream for nitrogen here. So in a year where the nitrogen band or the range of nitrogens might be seen from 1.25 up to 1.65 say, we will try and band the nitrogens from 1.2 to 1.45 and then 1.45 to 1.65. They've done it here for a number of years, and if we can, if the season allows, we will. And what that does is then give a bulk that is really enticing to the customer. So from a maltster's perspective, to have a bulk with a really narrow stream nitrogen band supposedly helps the processing aspect of it. Quality is very important to Highland Grain. The quality of barley that we sell to the customers needs to be top notch. It secures future contracts, it stops us bouncing from one customer to another year on year. They trust what we give them. And that quality has been built up over 40 years of trading. My predecessor was very big in quality, the staff are really big in quality. We've got loads of systems in place to ensure that quality. Take pre-deliveries for example. We carry out a really robust pre-delivery process. So every single member will provide us pre-deliveries when they cut X amount of tonnes or whatever fields. We'll test that in the lab. They'll get the results via text, so we know exactly what's sat on what farm and what bay, what shed, and what we can uplift. It makes it easier for the member. It makes it easier for us. Everybody knows where they stand, and it makes it easier for Leanne in the office managing the uplift as well. So yeah, quality's big for us. Gordon in the lab, he's been here since he left uni. There's no rush about Gordon, he's methodical, to say the least. But I embrace that, you know, it's good. There's never any ifs, buts and maybes with Gordon. If he says it's something, it's something. So, you know, yeah, we're very proud of the quality that we produce. The staff make a big difference here. They've all been here for a long time. It really stood out for me when I came for the interview for the job, how long the staff had been here and how committed the staff were, how much they enjoy harvest. There's a real buzz about the place this time of year. You know, they enjoy seeing the sheds filled with barley as much as I do. It's a nice place to work.
In the heart of Angus, Tom Hopkinson and his family farm at Lindurtis Farms. Tom gives us a fascinating insight into his cattle enterprise and the benefits of winter feed planning.
My name's Tom Hopkinson. We're Lindurtis Farms Limited, mixed farm based just outside Cairmuir in Angus. We have about 420 hectares of combinable crops and potato lets. And within that there's some soft fruit as well. We calve around 190 cows a year, of which around 80 is pedigreed Aberdeen Angus. We produce bulls for breeding and heifers for breeding as well. And the rest are all finished on farm at around 16, 17 months old. They go up to Port Lethen at Macintosh Donald and supply Tesco's. One of the changes we've made here in recent years has been the Aberdeen Angus herd. We've decided to go back into pedigree Aberdeen Angus breeding to produce not only our own heifers but our own bull replacements as well. Also to sell breeding bulls into the marketplace as well, off of farm and into auction markets as well. Part of this has been an embryo flushing programme, and this has been a great success for us, and we think this is down to predominantly knowing our silage quality and keeping a consistent feed in front of them throughout this period. We've changed to a more native breed. So with the pedigree Aberdeen Angus, we're using a lot more Aberdeen Angus genetics within our commercial herd as well. This has meant we've moved from a bull-based system finishing at 12 months old to castrating all our commercial calves at birth and finishing them at 16 months old. The larger stots are kept inside and finished on a forage barley diet. The remainder all finished at grass in the second summer. With the Aberdeen Angus breed in particular, we're achieving a much higher price with the extra premium we have for the breed. We're finishing a lot more cattle from grass, which is a lot cheaper to grow. We're utilising what we have on farm a lot better than we ever did. So all our cattle are weaned in October, and we do this into the sheds to reduce poaching and any possible breakouts if we were to do this in the field. From there we batch our cattle. The younger cows, which would be the in-calf heifers and the first calved cows, which are calved at 2 years old, they're kept inside. Our older, fitter cows that are able to run outside for a little bit longer are run down on our silage fields that haven't been cut since August. They will graze those down. Once that's grazed off, they'll run on stubble turnips that we've sown earlier on in the year. They'll hopefully stay outside until just after Christmas, weather allowing. This means when they come in, they're in the top condition for calving well without any assistance from ourselves. The big change is we pay a lot more attention to what we have on farm, what we can feed our cattle from what we can grow here. So our silage, it's analysed by SAC and FORFA, so we know exactly what we have in stock. We label each field as it's wrapped and stacked, and we can then balance that. We sit down with Karen Stewart from SAC and we do our rations. We know how many cows we have to winter and an educated guess of how long they're going to spend inside, so we can come up with a good budget of what we have and then what our shortfalls are from there. So what we need to buy in to balance our feed for the winter. I think it's very important to know what you've got on farm. If you don't measure your silage, how do you know how much you need to feed your cows? This has been a huge thing for us. We've really cut down on the amount of silage we need on farm We concentrate on making a better quality silage and feeding less of it. This has been a big saving because silage is not a cheap crop to grow, as well as plastic now being an issue for getting recycled. A lot less bales on farms, a lot less plastic to be recycled and sorted through. So for us, the benefits of planting forage for our feeding, it's been a very quick and simple process. It does not take long at all, and it puts us into a position where we know exactly what we have going into the winter. We've been able to see that we have a shortage of silage. In one particular year, we had a shortage of silage and we had an excess of straw, so we had Harborough come in and ammonia treat a heap of straw for us. It gave us the confidence going into the winter that we had what we needed on farm. Last year, when we analysed our silage, we realised we were short in protein. And the way protein prices are just now, it's led us to look at other avenues for homegrown protein. The field behind me here is a field of beans. This is purely for the livestock. We're hoping to get it cut next week and analysed, and that will give us a homegrown protein source that we can utilise. I very much doubt we would have even looked at that if it hadn't been for a well thought out feed plan. We're part of a benchmarking group which has been set up by Thrums Vets in Kerry by Graham Richardson, and through this we've had the opportunity to take part in trials and tests, one of which was feeding for fertility. From that we tested a portion of our cows, and from this we found that some of the cows were not at the condition they should be. It led us to look at the systems that we have here, and in one particular case, one of the sheds, the troughs just were not big enough. Even though we were feeding that shed twice a day, the cows were not getting the intake that they needed. So from that we've put in larger concrete bunkers, feeding once a day, which is the way the rest of the farm's fed, and we can see now that it's made a huge difference. The cattle are in better condition, there's not the fighting at the feed rail, and just it's a lot better system altogether from one simple change.
Middleton of Rora is an organic dairy farm near Peterhead in Aberdeenshire, run by owners Bruce and Jane Mackey. They run a herd of 250 Holstein Friesian cows through a robotic milking system of 4 Lely robots and produce their own yoghurt under the Rora Dairy brand. The Mackeys' farming motto is "Farm as if you'll live forever." There's a strong focus on environmental sustainability with the aim of breeding long-life, healthy cows.
We're 560 acres here, mostly grass. We also grow some spring barley, some of which is in whole crop, and the rest of it we combine and feed back to young stock and the cows as part of their organic ration. The cows at the moment are yielding about 31 litres. They've come back a bit since we moved it from conventional to organic production, about 10% or so. The butter fats are good. At the moment we're just above 4%, about 4.1, and our proteins would be somewhere around about 3.1, 3.2. We have a liquid contract with Graham's, and we also make yoghurt on the farm under the Rora Dairy brand.
Genomic testing of heifers plays a key role in breeding the next generation of dairy cows and improving the genetic merit of the herd.
Our ideal cow that we're trying to breed is something that lives a long time, that's very healthy and gives a bit of milk in the thing, and probably in that order actually. One of the things that we're trying to do is to constantly improve the cows that we have. And we've got a number of cows that in the past have produced 100 tonnes. I think we're at 25, 26 at the moment, and half of those cows would have been in the last 6 years. But we're striving to develop the genetic potential of the cows by looking at genomics and how better to breed them and bring in those 3 traits that we want of longevity, health and milk. So the tools that we've used to improve the genetics of the cows probably date back to the 1980s when we first became a pedigree herd. And then we've been herd recording with the CIS, so we use that data, which is great, to identify healthy cows and productive cows in that. We have access to the AHDB's herd genetic report, which is free to anyone that milk records on the HDB website, and has a number of traits, including the PLI, the Profitable Life Index. The next step for us was when genomic testing became available, and we started that about 5 years ago, and really took it up with a sort of vengeance a couple of years ago, to the extent that now every calf is tested.
Colin Penny is a livestock technical vet for Zoetis, who works with Bruce on the farm's genomic testing of heifers.
Part of my job working with Zoetis is providing consultancy for farmers who are using our genomics test, which is Clarify Plus, and that's how I met Bruce a couple of years ago. When we genomically test a heifer calf or a bull calf, what we do is we take a tissue sample and really analyse the DNA in that tissue sample in detail. Now we tend to take small tissue samples which end up in a wee container like this, a TSU. The tissue sample that's usually taken from an ear punch is then sent off to a genomics lab where they do an analysis of the DNA, and what we're really looking for is tiny variations in the inherited genes between animals. And what the geneticists do is convert the code that's been extracted from the DNA into PTAs, predicted transmitting abilities, or the genetic indexes that farmers are used to seeing in proofs.
We tend to test everything as very young heifers indeed, between a week and a month old in a batch. We find that because they're around the steading at that age, they're easy to get at that point, and we're able to test them without much fuss.
Using genomic testing has allowed Bruce to breed using the top animals identified in the herd. So what differences has it made to the business?
We breed on the top animals that we identify through the genomics, and that's around about 90 to 100 animals. We need somewhere about 70 replacements in a year. If we breed about 90, it gives us a bit of choice once they come through, so that's an important thing. And the rest of the herd we breed to Aberdeen Angus. It's into the beef chain. It's a policy of sex semen and beef. I think the important thing for me is that we're not a slave to it. We have our favourite cows. For me, it's 203. She's been a terrific cow for us. She's produced 106 tonnes of milk, which is a huge amount of milk, over 9 lactations, now into her 10th lactation. She's calved every year. She's never had a case of mastitis. That is the cow we want to breed from. Her index isn't that high, but hey, let's put a straw of sex semen in her and take another calf, and if that calf stacks up against the rest of them, well, we'll welcome her into the herd. We want to keep on breeding the cows we like.
The difference between a parent average genetic index, so say a young heifer calf, her production traits will have a reliability of around 20-30% at best, whereas if you genomically test that same heifer calf, the genomic results will have a reliability for production traits of between 60 and 75%, as high as that. So it really just increases the reliability of decision making when you're looking at that animal's information. Most of the common dairy breeds that are being used in the UK, you can access genomic information and use genomic testing. The problem comes when you start crossbreeding. So you really need an animal that's at least 87.5% purebred to get a genomic evaluation usually. It might come in the future, crossbred evaluations, but at the moment it's really for people that are breeding fairly purebred cows. The challenges of genomic testing is you do get a vast amount of information back when you genomically test, and that is presented in different ways. You'll get lists of individual traits given to you, and also it can be combined into indexes like PLI, Profitable Lifetime Index, or in Bruce's case he's using DWP, Dairy Wellness Profit, as an index. One of the other advantages of genomic testing is parentage correction. So what we find on average when we get a large group of heifer samples submitted, we'll find between 10 and 15% parentage errors on a lot of those batches. And correcting, what the genomics does is they find the true sire and correct it. So the problem with having animals with parentage errors is a heifer will go through her whole life contributing wrong information into the database if that's not corrected. So I think that's a really viable part of genomic testing, is any parentage errors are picked up, corrected, and the farmer gets a true evaluation of that heifer. Animals that you really should be focused on for genomic testing is heifers, young heifers. Ideally you want them tested well before you're going to make breeding decisions. So we would normally recommend that they're tested under 10 months of age, but you can test at anything from a day of age and when the calves are born. But the key thing is getting the information back in time to make breeding decisions. So it's got to be obviously well in advance of the first mating.
This is a group of calves that we genomically tested, and the results have just come back. Obviously the advantage of genomically testing is that it tells you things that the eye can't see. So in particular I want to highlight this animal here, which is 3616. Doesn't look a whole heap different from the other ones.
It was quite exciting for Bruce last week when we found out that this heifer has got a DWP Dairy Wellness Profit evaluation of 1031, which means that she's actually joint top DWP index heifer in the whole of the UK. So we've tested around about 18,000 animals with that index. So it's, yeah, good news for Bruce, and hopefully she will go on to perform to her expectations. And the fact that she's got such a high DWP index is a combination of she's got excellent milk production, especially solids figures, and also very good wellness evaluations, so resistance to disease, good longevity, all the things that hopefully Bruce is looking for in a cow for the future.
These are bulling heifers. We take them inside, put the collars on and serve them to a natural heat. And the thing that we want to look at here are these two heifers here, which are actually twins. It's 3333 and 3334, standing next to each other. Twins, obviously not identical. One's red and white, one's black and white. But you know, on their parent average, they would have exactly the same figures. But if we look at what the genomics tells us about them, is that there's a bit of difference between them genomically as well as just their coat colour. So in terms of the DWP index, the black one comes in at 544, and the red and white one comes in at 400. So there's 100 odd points of difference between them there. If we look at their milk, there's 300 pounds of difference of milk predicted production between the black and white one being higher than the red and white one.
Twins are a really good way of demonstrating the difference between parent average evaluations and genomic evaluations, because as Bruce has said earlier, on paper these heifers would have an identical parent average evaluation, but because we've genomically tested them, we've detected the variations that occurred when these two calves were conceived, and in some of the traits they're markedly different, which you wouldn't know unless you did genomic testing.
Genomic testing costs money, so what is the cost benefit of it?
The cost of genomic testing at a sort of entry level is about £30. If you want the all singing, all dancing clarified plus that we're doing with Zootis, it's £38 or so, around about that figure. To me, that's an investment worth making, because it's not that dissimilar from the cost of a draw of sex semen at 30 odd pounds. That genetic test lasts the lifetime of the animal, and so it's a cheap investment, particularly if you regard the cost of rearing that heifer and such like. So it's a little cost up front. The difference that's been calculated between the bottom 25% and the top 25% is around about £1,200 over the lifespan of the cow. So that £30 to identify the right animals to breed from and the right animals not to breed from in your herd, to me, is quickly paid back.
I think the short-term advantages come with really targeting the use, for example, of sex semen. So if you've got 80 heifers to breed, rather than putting sex semen across 100% of them, with your genomic results you can really rank them accurately and say, right, we're going to put sex semen in the top 80% of these heifers. The ones who are slightly poorer, they'd be better to get beef semen or even sold if you've got excess heifers. It can seem quite expensive per animal, but if, say we say a cost of 25, 35 pounds, as a percentage of the lifetime rearing costs of a heifer to the point of first calving, which is around about £1,800 last time it was surveyed, it's less than 2% of that heifer's rearing costs to a point of first calving. So for the same sort of price as a straw of sex semen, you've really got a lifetime of information from that heifer from day one.
My take-home comment would be the return is obvious, and you should do a significant number of your heifers so that you have choice to make a selection from them. Doing 4 or 5 is pretty meaningless. Doing a meaningful number so that you can pick out the ones you want to breed from, the ones you don't want to. And I think farmers should really go for it and make a point of doing that. It's not rocket science, do it.
To find out more about genomic testing, please visit the website.
So this field of winter barley and winter wheat where we had trials is now being harvested, and like much of the Lothians where we are, it's been one of the easiest harvests, so nice conditions to get going. It's been much catchier for other people. So the field now has a bit of volunteer growth, and what we're thinking about now is the management of the pest problems for the following crop that will come into this field. So barley yellow dwarf virus being one of the key things coming in on aphids and carrying over where there's any living plants, any of that green bridge. So what we're doing here is desiccating the volunteer cereals and any grass weeds that are there so that the aphids have nowhere to live, leaving a fortnight's gap before any new crop goes in. Alternatively, you can plough the crop in but leave it for at least a month before the new crop appears. And that's really, aphids are really so resilient and can walk up even from ploughed in crop and get onto that new growth. And we are seeing more of barley yellow dwarf virus because of the reduction in available pesticides that are there. Pyrethroids, clearly a treatment for that emerging crop to manage aphids, but we're really thinking of them now in terms of managing the flying aphids, the ones that are flying in. And if you can manage the walking aphids, the ones that are coming through on that green bridge, then do it either through desiccating the previous crop or through, the ploughing in of the stubble. There's a few pest problems to think about for the winter crops, the winter cereals that are going into the ground at the moment. So slugs are obviously a perennial problem for us, and they're not particularly bad in terms of numbers this year. So really thinking about putting slug traps out to check whether slug treatments are necessary is a kind of key point. So the general rule of thumb is if you're putting traps out and conditions are good, if you're getting about 5 slugs per trap, then you're probably meriting a treatment. And we've moved on to ferric phosphate as the treatment of choice. So, using that to manage slug problems. Another one to think about is wheat bulb fly. So crops going in after other crops where the ground has been relatively bare, so potatoes, veg or fallow. And a couple of options there. We're left with one seed treatment, Signal, which will give you some local containment of wheat bulb fly damage. Or you can think about using bare areas of ground as a kind of decoy to draw the wheat bulb fly away from the main cereal crop. Or perhaps if you know your wheat bulb fly counts in the field, you could actually just think about slightly earlier drilling for those very marginal cases where perhaps just a bit of earlier, more vigorous growth would be all you need to get away from the problem. Some of the grass tree seeds that have gone in over the summer have struggled a little bit in the dry conditions. And if you're reseeding now, then leather jackets have remained problematic. Again, we've lost the Cooperative leather jacket spray, so really the only management options now are where you're ploughing up grass is to try and chop them as best you can, and then leave a gap of at least 4 or 5 weeks before the new grass goes in. And that's really the same if you're following grass with a cereal crop, really aiming to plough in and damage those leather jackets and allow for as much bird predation as well as you can before you put that new crop into the field. The new oilseed rape crop is generally gone into nice moist soils and is coming away well, so that's an encouraging start to the season. And what we're looking at in crops at the moment is signs of pest damage. So slugs are clearly a feature, and the volunteer plants I'm looking at here, the holes in the leaves are generally slug damage. But flea beetles and cabbage stem flea beetles are the other two things that will be damaging leaves and creating smaller shot holes. For flea beetle, fortunately, Scottish crops are still at much lower risk than the English crops south of the border. And once they're at the 3-4 leaf stage, they're generally out of the danger period. For cabbage stem flea beetle, really working to thresholds is key. So again, once they're beyond 4 or 5 leaves, they're out of the danger period. But if there's only 1 or 2 leaves and damage levels, shot holing is up to about 25% of the leaf area, then a treatment's probably justified. And if they're at the 3 or 4 leaf stage, then around 50% of the leaf area damaged is the indicative threshold for treating the crop.
Hello, I'm Raymond and welcome to the Rural Roundup. ARPID and Nature Scot are currently working through and reviewing the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme applications that they received earlier this year. Applicants should hear back shortly on the outcome of the applications. The Muirburn season opened on the 1st of October and runs to the 15th of April in Scotland. If you're planning Muirburn, please refer to the Muirburn Code beforehand. The Scottish Sheep Upland Support Scheme opened on the 1st of September. If you're an eligible producer in the Region 3 area, please remember to submit your claim form before the 30th of November. A reminder that the Scottish Suckler Beef Support Scheme runs from the 1st of January to the 31st of December. Stay tuned for more from FAS TV and the Farm Advisory Service.
Next time on FAS TV. As Glasgow prepares to become the focus of the world, with global leaders gathering at COP26 to discuss mitigating climate change, we look at what the impact might be for Scottish farming.